in the Shell is the live-action interpretation of the Ghost in the Shell animated movie that came out in the late 90s, and it stars Scarlett Johansson and is directed by the guy who did Snow White and the Huntsman. That's really questionable. So yeah, I was really excited to see this movie. I am not the hugest Ghost in the Shell fan. I do own the movie on Blu-ray, and at first when I saw the animated movie, I didn't really appreciate it, but when I heard all this like information stating that it was the movie that kind of started, you know, The Matrix and all action sci-fi movie franchises, I began to appreciate it a little bit more knowing that information after the movie. So knowing that it is responsible for movies such as The Matrix, I do understand now. And when I heard that they were coming out with a live-action movie, I was like, oh, okay, cool, a Ghost in the Shell movie coming out in 2017, a modern take on the animated movie. So how were they going to do this? And then I saw that Scarlett Johansson was attached to play Major, and obviously there was a lot of controversy with that. I didn't care, but we'll get into that a little bit later. And I was just excited to see, you know, another anime being turned into a live-action movie, because I really wanted to see if they would not pull another Dragon Ball Evolution or Avatar: The Last Airbender. I really wanted to see if they would do a really good live-action anime movie. And I have to say, I didn't have a problem with this movie whatsoever. Like, it's good. It's not the most amazing thing. It's certainly not like a bad adaptation whatsoever, like Assassin's Creed, where it's just like, this is actually a really good interpretation of this world and the kind of futuristic Japan that they present into this film. Like this futuristic, holographic kind of looking world where it's, you know, for some reason, like even though they have all this technology and they still like drive cars from like the 80s and 90s, it's still a really good match of like the animated movie. Like they kept it to its core, and that's something that I really appreciated about it. And it still keeps the original themes from the animated movie. Like, what if we lived in a world where we could change our bodies through cybernetic enhancements? What if we could put our consciousness or our minds or our ghosts into these synthetic bodies? What would happen? Like, how would our world be? There's a lot of similar themes in this movie, and there's actually a lot of iconic scenes from the animated movie that they put into this live action movie that was pretty accurate for the most part. They happened during different times, like in the animated film. Like, I was wondering like when this certain scene was gonna happen, because this certain scene that I was wanting to happen happened like in the beginning of the animated film, and I was like wondering myself, like, they're taking a long time to get to the scene, but they eventually got to it, and I was like, that's pretty visually accurate, really. In terms of getting this world right visually and just doing the same scenes from the animated films without just doing like the same scenes, like it felt like they tried to implement their own kind of plot into these films, like the movie's plot, not just the animated film's plot, but like they wanted to recreate these scenes, but not just recreate them, but kind of put their own spin to them plot-wise. So it wasn't just like an exact copy of the animated film. It was like, it was, you know, a copy, but, you know, it happened in different ways. Like, it happened for a different reason. And let's talk about Scarlett Johansson as Major, because a lot of people have been talking about this. They've been talking about whitewashing in movies, and just this idea of why did they get Scarlett Johansson to play a Japanese anime character. I wasn't really offended. I'm not really offended by stuff like that, because the majority of anime characters are based upon Western culture. Because when you look at an anime character, the first thing that pops into your mind is not Japanese. They don't look Japanese. Like, if you didn't know that anime characters came from Japan, you would not assume that an anime character is Japanese. You would just be like, oh, they have big eyes. Wow, this got racist. What I'm trying to get at is an anime character doesn't look like a Japanese person. They look like just a normal drawn person, like with Western culture sometimes. And I do understand that the character is Japanese, but kind of how they approached it in this movie is that it is a cyborg. And technically, a cyborg can't have an ethnicity unless you, like, you know, do it purposefully, you know? And for the most part, ScarJo looks like the character. I didn't know that the character was Japanese when watching the movie. So when I saw ScarJo as the character, I just immediately assumed, wow, she looks great as the Major. And she does a really good job in this film. I really liked her, and I was actually contemplating whether or not this was like in her top 10 performances. I really enjoyed her as Major, and I like what they did with her, because when the first trailer came out, there was a lot of controversy because in the original animated movie, it was exploring what she was. Was she human? Was she a cyborg? Because, you know, it's a human mind in the shell. So the animated movie was exploring what she was at that given moment, whereas the live action movie, it's exploring what she used to be before she became a cyborg. And that's why there was a lot of controversy when the first trailer came out, is how accurate was this going to be to the original animated movie. And I kind of liked it, actually. I like how it surfaced into how she became a cyborg, and it kind of gave her more human emotions, and it just kind of made it a little bit more relatable, and you kind of understood why she was kind of researching, investigating, like not just who she was, but if you have no memory, you would actually go looking for yourself in the past and not necessarily the present, you know? So that kind of made sense, actually. However, what I really didn't like about that is it affects the villain in this movie, and I actually think that the villain is a little bit more interesting in the animated movie, because without going into spoilers, like how that villain is created is like, wow, that could maybe happen in the future. Like, what if like a villain like that was spawned through that kind of creation? You know, it was a really interesting concept that the animated movie presented, and they didn't do that in this live action movie. They kind of had a different origin to it. And without pointing to certain characters, there's kind of like a love interest thing that kind of appears in this movie in the third act that I was just like, no, that wasn't in the animated movie whatsoever. That's just Hollywood. So that's something I really appreciate about the animated movie was, you know, how they approached the villain. And in this one, I just didn't really like how they did it. I didn't really like how they wrote him into the story. That was obviously Hollywood, just like, you know, trying to reach out to a different demographic, I want to say. It felt kind of cliche, really, and that's kind of the reason why I prefer the animated feature a little bit more. But this movie is a good adaptation. I want to get it out there. This is no Dragon Ball Evolution. This is a good adaptation to anime, and I can't wait to see what the American movie industry does with anime features in the future. Anime features in the future? What? I can't wait to see how they adapt more anime features, and I want to see a good Akira movie someday. And there's actually talk with Jordan Peele directing an Akira movie. Like he's on talks to like maybe direct an Akira. So I'm really excited about that, and I am happy to say that they are going into a really good direction, especially with Ghost in the Shell. This is really good. I will say that it is slow at some points, but in terms of getting this world right and the performances and them taking this like pretty seriously, except for like the third part where they kind of tried to implement a love interest into the story, I think it was really well done. So if you're a fan of Ghost in the Shell, I think you'll really appreciate this movie. If you want it to be exactly like the anime, it's probably not going to be that way. And I think Scarlett Johansson did a really good job as Major. I had no problems whatsoever. I don't think that race should really affect a performance. I only think that race should affect a performance if it affects just like, you know, if it's like really stereotypical, like the performance itself, or if it affects a story, like there being like a black Johnny Storm and a white Susan Storm in Fantastic Four, and they're supposed to be brother and sister, but they're different colors. So what? That's the only time where I've ever been really, really, really affected by ethnicity in a movie, but with Scarlett Johansson as Major, I was not affected whatsoever, and I don't think it's really going to affect anyone unless you're really easily triggered. I'm just an easygoing guy who makes YouTube videos, but if you're going to be that guy who spends like a majority of hours like going YouTube video to YouTube video, like commenting like, oh, I don't think Scarlett Johansson should be like Major, then you're probably not going to get married anytime soon, unless the person that you marry is, you know, easily triggered as you. But then you'll probably get divorced because you'll probably be triggered by your wife not being Asian. Just guys, that was my review of Ghost in the Shell. Comment down below what you thought of this movie. If you've seen it yet, like the video, share it, and please subscribe to PixelTalk if you haven't yet for more movie reviews, gaming content, and so on. Thank you guys so much. I am Corbin Stuckey, and this is Pixel Talk.